Hello again everyone, I'm Dave Thomas and today I'm building the Skyrider by Estes. This is one of their E2X kits and it goes together in about an hour. We'll go ahead and open this up and make sure we have all of our parts. Alright, go ahead and pull out the instructions here and let's check on the parts list. So we've got a body tube and another body tube. So this is the lower body tube, this is the upper. And these are all nicely pre-finished. Alright, and we've got our pencil tip top piece, nose cone. Okay, some self-adhesive decals. And then a small parts package here that has the parachute shock cord and engine clip. Another small parts package that includes the engine mount and the launch lug. Okay, pre-made fin assembly. And that should do it. Okay, so just do a quick check here, make sure we have everything, and we do. So I'm going to put this stuff away and we'll start in on the build. So to begin with, we're going to make some marks here on the engine mount, which is this blue tube. Alright, and so they've got this in both metric and English system, whichever you prefer. I prefer to go metric, so we're going to make one mark here at 25 millimeters. Okay, and another mark at 63.5 millimeters. So that's going to be up here. Okay, and then you'll probably want to extend the lower one here a little bit so that it's not covered up by the engine hook. And I like to just write on the rear end of it here aft so that I don't get this turned around while I'm building it. Okay, and so at that upper mark here we're going to cut about a 3 millimeter slit, or about 1/8 of an inch at that line. Okay, and then we're going to take the engine hook, take the right angled end of this, and this is just going to insert into that notch. And this is why I wanted to extend that line that we had here, because the clip does tend to cover it up. Alright, then we're going to take the black retainer ring here. Alright, now this is going to slide all the way down to that second mark, so I'm just going to dry fit this here and make sure it fits. Alright, and then I'm going to push that back up a bit and now add a ring of either wood glue or white glue. Alright, and I'm just going to start out with a small bead of glue here going around. Okay, and now I'm just going to push the ring through the glue and up to that mark, and then I'll just smooth out the remaining glue there and wipe that off. This really isn't a load-bearing part, it just keeps the metal retaining clip in place. Now, next we're going to install the engine block. And here, instead of trying to squirt glue down into the tube, I'm going to use an applicator here. Alright, so our thrust ring, right here, or engine block, same thing. Alright, this is going to go right in the end of the motor mount like this, and will sit atop the engine clip. Okay, now we don't want a lot of glue on this because we don't want to force glue down inside the motor mount. And so this is why I want to use an applicator here. So I've got a little bit more control. So I'm just going to start with the glue just inside the forward edge there, and not a very thick bead. And now I'm just going to push this down, and it's going to come to rest against the engine clip. Now it's going to tend to try and push downward here so that it's off center. Okay, just pull that back up if that happens, so the ring is level while it sets upon the engine clip. Okay, let this dry for a few minutes before we go on to the next step. Next, we're going to insert the engine mount into the fin assembly here. And if you look at the fin assembly carefully, it's got a notch here on one side, and that is going to accommodate the engine clip. Alright, but we need to do this from the aft end of the fin assembly. Okay, so line that up again and push this forward. Okay, and that should stop with the engine mount close to, if not flush. And this is why we wanted to make sure that we let this dry first, is because that black ring is holding this in place from the aft end. The next thing we're going to do is apply the green ring here. And again, I'm just going to dry fit this to make sure it's going to go on. Alright, and then we're going to push it over the engine clip and all the way down here to the top of the fin assembly. What we're doing, in effect, is sandwiching this ring of plastic between the black ring that's already in the aft end here and the green ring that we're going to put on top of that. So next what we need to do is apply a ring of glue about 1 centimeter from the forward end. Okay, so I don't have this on very far, so 1 centimeter is going to be about here. Alright, again, you don't need a large amount, but try and keep it even. Okay, now this is the tricky part here. Be hanging on to the aft end of the motor mount so it doesn't go anywhere on you, and then slide this forward all in one motion. So once it gets over, come on, here we go. Alright, and then while you're holding the engine mount, not the fins, make sure that goes all the way forward as far as it can. Alright, now I've got a little bit of play there yet. Alright, now something else you can do if you've got an old motor casing is stick that in there. That'll give you something more to push against rather than the tube itself. There we go. Okay, and now that is fully up against the tubes in there. And if there's any excess glue here, go ahead and wipe that off. Once you've got this glued together, set it aside and make sure it dries completely before we go on to installing it into the body tube, which is the next step here. Okay, so this is a good time to go have a cup of coffee or have some lunch or whatever. Take a break for about 30 minutes and then come back and we'll install this. While we're waiting for the glue to dry on the engine mount, we can skip ahead and prepare the nose cone and parachute. So the nose cone's all completely pre-colored and everything. You can probably see a seam in yours, and normally I would sand that down or scrape it down, but since this is pre-finished, it would just ruin the finish, so we'll just ignore that part. You may need to clear the eyelet here, so there's often a little bit of excess plastic called flash here, and you just want to take a hobby knife and carefully cut that out, but don't cut the eyelet itself, because that's where your parachute and shock cord will attach. But just clear that excess plastic just like that. Okay. The parachute itself is pre-assembled. You just need to unfold it here. Go ahead and just lay that out. And this will have 3 loops attached to it. Alright. In some of the parachutes they're attached on each side like this. In others, one will go across the middle. It doesn't matter, it's going to work out the same. So start by gathering this on one of your fingers. Now if you just want to follow the instructions, they tie the parachute directly to the nose cone. Alright, so first what we want to do is, in one hand I'm holding this in the center, and then in the other hand I'm holding the loops of the shroud lines here. And what we want to do is adjust the relative lengths of these so that all the corners of the parachute come down roughly in the same place. Okay. Now this one feels like it's got one shroud line a bit longer than the others. So I'm just going to try and get there as best that I can. Alright, and then holding on to those loops so they don't change place, you're going to take all 3 of those loops, narrow them down, and put that through the nose cone eyelet. Let me use a pencil here to help pull those through. This has got a really small eyelet on it. Alright. Once you've got those through, then you need to re-establish the loops. Now, the thing I don't like about doing it this way, actually there's 2 things. One, it's permanent. If you want to change the chute out later on, you almost always have to cut it off. And the other is this process of moving the loops makes them change relative length. Right, so in the instructions, it shows passing the entire parachute through those loops, and then you pull it taut. The other way you can do it is to pass the nose cone through and pull it taut. Either way, we'll bring those loops together down here on the eyelet and tie it on. Right, now a third way, and the way I prefer, and if you've seen any of my other videos you'll know this already, I prefer not to have a permanent attachment. So I'm going to pull mine back off there, find my loops again with my other finger. There we go. So once again I've got all my loops. Alright, I'm going to readjust those to get the corners as close as possible. And now I'm going to attach this to a snap swivel. Okay, this is just like what you'd use for fishing, and that's where I get mine, is in the fishing section of a department store or sporting goods store. For a model rocket this size, the size of the snap swivel doesn't make a whole lot of difference. The thing we need to watch for is you have to make sure that the snap portion is big enough to fit over the eyelet on the nose cone. And I'll show you that in just a moment. Alright, so once again, get your loops, feed those through the snap swivel on the swivel end. Alright, pass that through, and back here I'm not letting go of my shroud lines, so they're not changing length on me. And then I'm going to pass the entire snap swivel through those loops, pull the loops down, and then pull it taut. Alright, now try and keep the loops down here on the bottom section. Pull that tight there. Make sure that your corners are still where you want them. As I said, I think one of these shrouds is a little bit longer than the others. But once you've got it where you want to, then go ahead and take just a little spot of wood glue or white glue and just work that into that knot. Doesn't take a lot, but this will keep the knot from shifting. Okay, and then when you're ready to put this all together, simply open up the snap part of this, attach the nose cone, and close the snap. Okay, and this, again, this is the part of size that you really need to worry about. Now this has got a really small eyelet, so just about anything will fit it. On other rockets where you have a bigger nose cone, though, you might need a bigger snap swivel, simply because of the size of the eyelet. Okay, I'm going to set this aside once more, and we'll go back to working on the engine mount and the body tube. My fin assembly is completely dry, and so now we're going to go ahead and insert that into the aft body tube. Okay, so this is going to be the section of the body tube that has the eraser on it, and this is going to fit in just like this. And I do recommend doing this as a dry fit first. Okay, now according to the instructions, we're going to put some glue up inside of here. Okay, and that will adhere to this. And I'm also going to put a thin layer of super glue on the plastic part here, just to give it a little extra adhesion. Okay, and you'll need to use, if you want to do this, use a gel type of super glue, because the runnier types just tend to soak into the cardboard and don't adhere. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and take my wood glue here, and I'm going to use an applicator. If you don't have one of these long ones, you can also just use a Q-tip. It just gives us a little bit more control. Alright, and this is going to go up ½ inch or so. 12 centimeters if you're, or 12 millimeters I should say, if you're metrically inclined. Okay, so I've got that there. And then here I'm going to apply my super glue. Now I don't want a lot of this because I don't want it squirting out the back. I'm going to put this right along the intersection here of the cardboard and the plastic. But I've had a lot of models that use this particular fin assembly system that after one flight or so they pop apart. Alright, so now I'm just going to insert this, and with a twisting motion I'm just going to slide that inward, and this will help distribute the glue better. Okay, and I've got just a little bit of super glue squirting out there. You can either just ignore that or carefully wipe it with a tissue. Alright, and you see the problem is if you wipe the super glue, it's going to take that finish off, so I'm going to just leave the rest of it alone there. Okay, so we're going to let this dry once more. And while that is drying, we're going to take the other tube. So this is our forward body tube. And we need the red tubing coupler here. This was in with the motor mount. Okay, first thing to do is simply mark this in the middle. Alright, here I'm going to use the English units because that's what it's designed in. So it's an inch long, we want ½ inch right there. Okay, so first we're going to take one end of the forward body tube now, and I'm just going to put a ring of glue right on the inside there. And now I'm going to take my coupler and insert that to my line. Okay, I'm going to set this aside and let it dry as well. So go ahead and take another short break and we'll come back when the glue is dried. My glue on both body tubes is dry now, and our next step in the instructions will be to attach these two. I'm going to skip ahead for just a moment before I do that. So for the launch lug here, now I need to make a mark at 5½ inches or 14 centimeters from the aft end, and we want to do this on the same side that our engine hook is. Now if your engine hook's not completely lined up here, that's fine. If it's, you know, but you want it close to the side that the launch lug is on. That way it keeps it out of the way when we go to set it for launch. So I'm going to go ahead here and make my mark. Okay, at 5½ inches or so here. And then I'm going to sight down it to make sure I'm in between the fins, and I am. Okay, now I'm going to just lay this on here for just a moment, and I'm going to make another mark here. Now in between those two marks, I'm going to scratch off the finish here with the edge of my hobby knife. Now try and keep this as straight and as narrow as you can. That way once we glue it in place, the scratched area won't show. Okay, and I'm purposely not quite going to my lines there. Alright, so now when I put this in place, I'm going to check it again, make sure I'm still in the center. Yep. Alright, and now I'm going to erase my little pencil marks here. Okay, and now I'm going to put on a bead of glue. And here again you can use either white glue or wood glue. Okay, so I'm just going to add this along here. Alright, now I want an even bead but not too thick or it'll take a long time to dry. And now I'm going to go ahead and put that onto my scratched area. And now I'm going to look down the tube again to make sure that this is completely parallel with the body tube. Okay, that was too much. Okay, so just you can kind of gun sight this and make sure that it's straight. Again, if it's not quite centered between two fins, as long as it clears the fin, then you're fine. I'm going to give that just a little more nudge. Alright, and I'm going to let that dry for a few minutes. We can keep working on this, just be careful not to bump it around too much. Okay, and now I'm going to go ahead and join the other body tube. And like I did with the coupler to begin with, I'm going to now add a ring of glue inside here. Okay, so just inside the body tube. And now I'm going to take my forward body tube, put the coupler in there. There we go. Alright, and I'm going to push that in and give it a... Nope, that's going to bind right away. Well, I guess I won't give it a little turn. Okay, go ahead and make sure it's even and as close to the other tube as you can. And you may need to actually hang on to that because the glue is going to cause a little bit of expansion of the cardboard. So go ahead and hold that in place for as long as you need to let that stay with as little gap there as possible. You can wipe off any excess glue. Okay, and now make sure that we didn't move our launch lug while doing that. And once again, I'm going to let this set and dry for a few minutes before we go on to doing the shock cord. Now that the glue has dried on the rocket, we can go ahead and attach the shock cord. Now the mount for this is actually part of the first page here. So it's this thing here. We're going to cut this out. So if you want to keep your instructions intact, go ahead and make a photocopy of this and cut it instead. All right, and using either your hobby knife or a pair of scissors, just go ahead and cut this whole thing out. And now what we're going to do is take our shock cord here and some glue, and again you can use wood glue or white glue for this. Do not use plastic cement or super glue as they can melt the rubber here. Alright, I'm just going to run a fairly heavy bead of glue down on the 3 and the 2 here, and I'm going to spread that around a little bit. Okay, and I'm going to lay this on at a bit of an angle. And the reason I'm going to do that is because this is going to fold up, and when this part folds up onto this part, this way the shot cord lays against itself rather than on top of itself. So once you got this down, go ahead and fold section 1 up onto section 2. Alright, and squeeze out any air. And then do that again, folding section 2 up onto section 3. Like that. Okay, and you can adjust the shot cord there a bit to get it to lay down as flat as possible. Okay, and now I'm going to give this a bend so it looks like this. Okay, I'm going to add some more glue now to this face. Okay, you want it kind of moderate here. It doesn't need to be really heavy, but you do want it to be uniformly spread over the surface here. Because the idea is we want this to be a nice tight lamination of paper and glue and have it become as flat as possible with as few air bubbles as possible. Alright, and I'm going to recurve it again here a little bit. And now this whole thing is going to go into the forward end of the rocket, and this needs to be about 1.5 inches or about 40 centimeters or so down inside the tube. If you get this up too high, then it may interfere with the nose cone and the ejection system may not work properly. So first I'm just going to slide this in, and now I'm going to turn it over so the glue is facing downward. And I'm going to take my finger, press the shot cord mount against the inside wall and against my hand here. And just put some even pressure on that. And squeeze all the glue up against the body tube and squeeze the air out. Now you probably won't be able to see this. Let's see if we can get a decent angle. Not really. Okay, it won't focus that quickly or that closely. But that's down a good 2 inches. And if you can get it down, if you can get it down farther, say if you have long skinny fingers, that works even better. Alright, so carefully now, we don't want to pull this loose, and you may even want to let this dry for a couple of minutes. But if you're okay with it right now, you can go ahead and tie on your nose cone. Okay, now if you use the permanent fixing method here, then this is tied onto the nose. If you went and used the snap swivel that I recommend, you can take it off, and it makes this part a lot easier. Okay, so now go ahead and thread the other end of the shot cord through there, and it's going to be kind of tight as it is a small one. If you need to, you can use a pencil tip or a pen tip just to push that through. Don't use your hobby knife. Alright, so just until you can grab it there. Alright, pull that through. Keep the free end here as short as you can. And then just tie a double knot or 2 half hitches into that. Alright, now again, we don't have a lot of room to work with here, so try and get this as small and as tight as you can get it. Pull it from both directions so we get any looseness out. And then you see how this is laying up against the shoulder like that. We don't want that to happen because that can prevent the nose cone from blowing clear. And so go ahead and cut this back to about 5 millimeters from the knot. Okay, you don't want to be right up against the knot because it may pull through. And then once you've got that there, take your wood glue or white glue and just put a little dab of glue on the knot. Alright, and then you can just work that around the knot. And this is just going to help keep that knot from coming loose. Alright. Then if you haven't got your parachute attached already, go ahead and attach that. Okay, now I'm not going to put this together quite yet because there's still wet glue inside, but this is how it's going to be assembled. We just need to put it together, and we can go ahead and do the decal here. Now before you do the self-stick decal, it's a good idea to go wash your hands thoroughly, especially if you've just been playing with glue here. So I'm going to go do that quickly and then come back. Now there's just a single large decal here, and you're probably going to want to put this on the side opposite the launch lug, that way it's visible on the launch pad. Okay, and this is going to go approximately here. You can actually put it anywhere you want. You know, a little bit forward, a little bit back. The instructions show this pretty much just on the aft part of the rocket. So it's still going to overlap a little bit here where we made the join. Now the adhesive on this is going to tend to grab really quickly, and if you try and reposition it, it almost always pulls up this pre-finish coloring that's on there. So start out by not doing that. Alright, so we will want to try and do this as lightly as possible, but just handling it by the edges here, and I'm going to try and kind of in one shot do this as straight as I can. So here I've just let it kind of fall there. Alright, now sometimes if you need to reposition it, if you're very careful and you haven't pressed this down, you can. Alright, I think mine's on there as pretty much as close as I'm going to get it. It's not quite straight. Let me see if we can do this. Now if it starts peeling up the color, my advice is just go ahead and put it down where it is. And I'll pull this down just a little bit. That looks better. Okay, once you get it in a position that you like, then go ahead and first just press down along the middle in both directions. Alright, and then move out from the middle to the sides and squeeze out the air bubbles. Okay. Now, one other thing you can do here that I don't think they show in the instructions. Let me check one more time to make sure. Oh, yeah, they do. Alright, so once this is dry, go ahead and apply a fillet on either side of this. And I recommend using white glue for this rather than the wood glue because it's going to be a much more transparent finish and won't be as noticeable. Okay, so here I'm going to go ahead and just put on a bead of, whoa, that was way too much glue. I'm going to put some glue on my finger. Just do it that way and just quickly wipe off any excess. So it does not show. I guess I'm just going to do it like this. Get used to using wood glue that's a whole lot more viscous, and then suddenly this is running all over the place. It actually does show why I prefer wood glue, because it stays in place better. But in this case, we want the transparency. Okay, so once you've got your fillets in the way you want them, go ahead and let this dry, in a horizontal position. Okay, and except for the final assembly, which you can do just exactly according to the instructions, this rocket is finished. So do have a great launch and a safe recovery, and please stay tuned for more of my videos.